Good morning. My name is Chris Fox, and today we're talking about keeping players coming back to your table. What makes them interested in your game, and why do they keep coming back? And there are a number of reasons, but I've boiled them down to probably the two easiest to implement. So there's lots of other stuff you need to do as a GM, but if you're doing these two things right, then you're probably keeping at least a minimal level of engagement for your characters. So the first thing you want to do is provide player agency. And by that I mean, if the player makes a choice in the world, unless you can think of an overwhelming reason why that choice is not possible, you should let them do it most of the time. If they're trying to do something. So as an example, I was running a Magitech Chronicles game recently, and the players had commandeered a necrotech ship. So it was powered with a soul drive. It 8 souls to fly. And they wanted to get rid of the ship. And they were in the spirit realm and being attacked by a spirit dragon. And rather than fight the dragon, which is what I expected them to do as the game master, the ship was perfectly capable of doing that, they decided, no, we'll give the dragon the ship. So one of the characters actually reached out and communicated with the dragon. They used the ship systems to send a missive to talk to the dragon. And as a result, they ended up making an ally and getting rid of their ship in a way that I didn't really expect at all as a game master. And I went with it. It changes the adventure that I had in mind. It, I guess, wastes a lot of content that I'd created, which, is a problem that many game masters are familiar with when players go off the rails. But the player in question seems like he's a lot more engaged afterwards because he had this great idea and it worked. And it wasn't just, me handing it to him. He had a good idea and it worked. If players come up with bad ideas, you don't have to let them work necessarily. But in this instance, it really was a great idea and it resulted in higher player engagement. That's player agency. Well, the opposite of player agency, I learned in a campaign by a game master. Should we give his name? Sure, why not? I'll give his first name. His first name was Tim. Anyway, so Tim ran a long-standing Rollmaster campaign, and he was a wonderfully descriptive GM, and he taught me a lot of very positive things. But one of the things that Tim did very poorly is take away agency on a very regular basis. So, as an example, our very first adventure, we were hired to take this wagon from town A to town B. Just, a simple job. My character was a merchant. It was my caravan. I was in charge. Well, we get there, and it turns out that we were hauling a corpse illegally. And so we get there and we're arrested. So my character is put in a jail cell, not necessarily a problem, except that it lasted for 2 full 8-hour sessions. So for 2 days of game time, it's like we would come over, we'd start gaming around noon, and we'd play till like 8 p.m. I just wasn't really involved. I didn't get a chance to play. I sat there and I watched other characters try and figure out how to get me out of the jail, which they eventually did, but that wasn't a fun experience for me. And it really lessened my engagement in the game. And I watched it happen a number of other times where agency would be taken away from a player. Not just from Tim, but in many other games from many other GMs, myself included. I've done it myself. Every time I do this, I feel like the player loses some interest in the game. So giving them agency and having them be involved in the game and letting their decisions matter is sort of critical as a GM. This is a shared storytelling experience, and really we're trying to get their involvement. So trying to get their engagement by allowing them to participate in the story is, in my opinion at least, the best way. So that's your first, pillar of player engagement is agency. The second is significance, and this is much easier for most GMs to do, I think. And that's that players want to matter to the story. So the very first thing that I do whenever I'm starting a campaign is I feel out what their backgrounds are. I look at each character, I see what their background is, I award them experience points for writing that background, I encourage them to create more, and then I think about how that material is going to influence the game. If somebody has a rich parent that wants them back, is there going to be bounty hunters coming after them? I mean, you really just think about, in universe, how would a character's background influence your story, and then make it do that. So if somebody's taken the time to write up their rich parents and the fact that they're sending bounty hunters, then have bounty hunters show up. And reward that sort of gameplay from your players, because then they feel significant. They understand that they're also the author of the story. It's not just you as the game master, but them as a player too. They get to feel like they're a part of things. And they should. They should leave their mark on the game, in my opinion. When you get to the end of a campaign after a year of gameplay, and you've had, 50 sessions, and these characters have become, much more powerful and, slain great threats and done amazing things, it's really cool to look back and see how your character participated in this adventure. Maybe you fulfilled a prophecy, or, you went from being a mercenary to owning your own starship and having a mercenary company underneath you. But the growth in our characters and the ability for us to influence the world around us and to build things really keeps players engaged. Many people do this through like crafting, as an example. They like engineering or magic item creation rules in your system. And the Magitech Chronicles, those things are all over the place, and people are constantly building with their forges. People really like to be able to make their own weapons and armor and create their own spells. And that, too, is a way for them to have agency and also significance, where if their character has invented a spell, they've added something to the universe and possibly to the game itself. So anyway, guys, I intended this to be a quick tip. Those are a couple of ways you can keep players coming back to your table that I've picked up over the years, mostly through mistakes in both categories. I'd love to hear your experiences. If you're an experienced game master, do you agree? Do you disagree? What are some of the other pillars you think need to come? And I'm not specifically talking about storytelling because that's its own video. I was more talking about technique. But if you want to talk about that, drop it in the comments. Let's hear about it. Anyway, guys, I am getting back to the writing, and I will see you next week.